Picture standing at the edge of a vast, vine-covered ruin deep in the jungles of Central America, where the air hums with the whispers of a civilization that vanished without a trace. Or gazing up at the towering pyramids of Teotihuacan, their stone faces still guarding secrets older than the Aztecs themselves. The ancient Americas were home to cultures so advanced, so mysterious, that even today, their greatest achievements defy explanation. From the breathtaking heights of Machu Picchu to the sprawling geometric wonders of the Nazca Lines, these places aren't just relics of the past, they're riddles waiting to be solved. What if I told you that beneath these iconic sites lie dozens of lesser-known enigmas, puzzles so baffling they've stumped archaeologists for centuries? Imagine cityscapes abandoned overnight, their inhabitants seemingly swallowed by time, or astronomical alignments so precise they rival modern technology, crafted by hands we still don't fully understand. These aren't just footnotes in history, they're gaping holes in our understanding of human ingenuity. How did the Maya calculate celestial events with near-perfect accuracy? Why did the builders of Cahokia, North America's lost metropolis, vanish without a trace? And what terrifying purpose did the sacrificial temple of Tikal truly serve? This is more than a journey through ruins, it's an expedition into the unknown. Over the next 25 mysteries, we'll uncover the truth behind these ancient marvels, separating fact from legend, science from speculation. You'll witness engineering feats that shouldn't have been possible, decode symbols that may hold the key to lost knowledge, and confront disappearances that remain chillingly unresolved. So brace yourself, because the answers might just rewrite everything you thought you knew about the past. The real question is, are you ready to step into the shadows of history? Stretching across nearly 200 square miles of Peru's arid desert, the Nazca Lines remain one of the most perplexing artistic feats of the ancient world. These enormous geoglyphs, some spanning over 1,000 feet, depict spiders, hummingbirds, monkeys, and geometric shapes so precise they seem etched by divine hands. But here's the twist, these designs are virtually invisible from the ground. To fully appreciate their intricate forms, you'd need to soar high above the desert, a perspective the Nazca people supposedly never had. So how did they create such flawless, sprawling artwork without ever seeing their own handiwork from above? Archaeologists have long debated their purpose. Some suggest the lines functioned as a colossal astronomical calendar, aligning with solstices and constellations to track seasons for planting crops. Others propose they were sacred pathways, walked during rituals to summon life-giving water in one of the driest places on Earth. Then there are the wilder theories that these precise formations were landing strips for extraterrestrial visitors or messages to the gods. But the most compelling clue might lie in the Nazca's own ingenuity. Recent experiments show that with simple ropes, wooden stakes, and careful scaling techniques, these ancient artists could have replicated their designs by breaking them into smaller, manageable sections, no aerial view required. Yet the mystery deepens when you consider the sheer ambition. Why invest centuries carving hundreds of figures into unyielding earth? Was it devotion, desperation, or something we've yet to comprehend? The desert keeps its secrets, but every crumbling line whispers a challenge. Decode us if you can. Deep in the jungles of Guatemala and Mexico, the ruins of Tikal, Palenque, and Calakmul stand as silent witnesses to one of history's most haunting vanishings. By the 9th century, the Maya, a civilization that had mastered mathematics, astronomy, and architecture, were abandoning their towering pyramids and sprawling city-states en masse. But why? For centuries, their collapse was painted as a cautionary tale of environmental recklessness, with theories blaming slash and burn farming or catastrophic drought. Yet modern archaeology tells a far more complex story, one where climate change, political upheaval, and human ingenuity collided in a perfect storm. Take the drought theory. Tree ring data from the region reveals a series of punishing dry spells between the years 800 and 1000. But here's what's fascinating. Some cities crumbled during these droughts while others thrived. Recent LiDAR scans, a technology that strips away jungle canopy to reveal hidden structures, show networks of reservoirs and canals in cities like Caracol, proving the Maya engineered sophisticated water systems to survive arid periods. So if they could adapt, why did so many centers still fall? That's where warfare enters the picture. Inscriptions on stone stelae describe escalating conflicts between rival kingdoms, with once allied cities like Tikal and Dos Pilas turning on each other in brutal power struggles. Excavations at sites like Cancrain reveal mass graves, suggesting violent overthrows. The Maya didn't just fade away. In many places, they fought themselves to the brink. But the most startling twist comes from those same LiDAR surveys. Beneath the dense foliage, researchers have uncovered vast, interconnected cities, some with populations rivaling modern metropolises. These discoveries shatter the old narrative of isolated city-states collapsing one by one. Instead, we now see a web of interdependent societies where the failure of trade routes or the fall of a single powerful hub could trigger cascading chaos. Imagine a domino effect. As crops failed and wars drained resources, people likely fled to surviving cities, overwhelming their infrastructure until even the strongest holdouts buckled. Yet the greatest mystery isn't why the Maya left, it's where they went. Genetic studies of modern Maya populations show unbroken lineages, proving their people never truly disappeared. Many likely migrated to coastal areas or joined smaller, resilient communities in the highlands. Their knowledge didn't vanish either. Spanish colonists recorded Maya priests still accurately predicting eclipses centuries after the collapse. What we call a fall might actually be a story of transformation, a civilization adapting to survive, even as its grandest symbols were reclaimed by the jungle. The stones whisper a reminder: collapse isn't always an ending. Sometimes it's just a change we haven't fully understood yet. Buried in the swampy lowlands of Mexico's Gulf Coast, the Olmec civilization left behind a calling card that defies logic: gigantic stone heads, some weighing as much as 40 tons, carved with such striking individuality they seem to stare right through you. These colossal heads, 17 discovered so far, tower over 9 feet tall, each wearing a unique helmet or headdress, their lips curled in subtle smirks or grimaces frozen in time. But the real shock isn't just their size, it's their uncanny resemblance to facial features more commonly associated with Africa, a detail that's fueled fiery debates for decades. How did a culture flourishing around 1200 BC, long before transatlantic contact was thought possible, depict these distinct traits? Mainstream archaeology suggests these are portraits of Olmec rulers, their flattened noses and full lips simply reflecting the diversity of indigenous Mesoamerican populations. Yet alternative theories point to potential pre-Columbian contact with African seafarers, a controversial idea, though not without precedent. Ancient Egyptian artifacts have turned up in the Americas, like the infamous cocaine mummies, and some linguistic studies note striking similarities between Olmec and West African words. But here's the catch: DNA evidence from Olmec-era skeletons shows no African ancestry, leaving us with a paradox. Could these heads be artistic exaggerations, like the enlarged ears of Buddhist statues, symbolizing wisdom or power? Or is there a lost chapter of human migration we've yet to uncover? Then there's the even bigger mystery, literally. The basalt boulders used to carve these monoliths were quarried from the Tuxtla Mountains, over 50 miles from where the heads were found. The Olmec had no wheels, no domesticated animals for heavy labor, not even sturdy ropes by most accounts. So how did they move 20 to 40 tons of stone through tangled jungle and swamp? Modern experiments suggest they might have used log rollers and rafts during flood seasons, leveraging rivers as natural highways. But even with these methods, the logistics are staggering. Imagine teams of laborers, likely hundreds at a time, hauling a single head for months, all without the promise of immediate reward, just the certainty that their ruler's face would endure for millennia. What's most haunting isn't the how, but the why. In a world without cranes or chisels, the sheer effort invested in these sculptures speaks of a society obsessed with legacy. Each head was deliberately buried, some facing the sky, others laid to rest like fallen warriors, as if the Olmec knew their civilization would vanish and wanted to leave something behind that even time couldn't erase. Today, they still challenge us, their silent gazes asking, "Remember me?" And in that question lies the true weight of these stone giants, not in tons, but in the burden of forgotten history. High in the Andes, where the air grows thin and shadows stretch long across the mountains, the stone walls of Chavín de Huántar hum with secrets. This sprawling temple complex, built over 3,000 years ago, isn't just another ruin, and it's a carefully engineered nightmare designed to alter the minds of those who entered. Step inside its maze of dimly lit corridors, and you'll find yourself in a world where architecture becomes hallucination, where sound bends reality, and where the line between God and predator blurs. The most chilling feature, a network of hidden ducts and channels that transform whispers into thunderous jaguar roars. Modern acoustic studies reveal these passages weren't random. They were precision-carved to amplify specific frequencies, making growls seem to erupt from the walls themselves. Combine that with the temple's dizzying, disorienting layout, hallways that slope unnaturally, staircases leading nowhere, and you have a recipe for psychological manipulation. But why? Archaeologists point to the residue of a powerful hallucinogen found on ceremonial snuff tubes, the vilca seed, a substance so potent it can warp time and summon visions. Picture this, a pilgrim, drugged and trembling, stumbling through darkness as unseen forces roar around them, their mind too scrambled to distinguish stone from spirit. Then there's the lanzon, a 15-foot-tall granite dagger thrust upright in the deepest chamber, its blade carved with the snarling face of a half-human, half-jaguar deity. This wasn't just art, it was the axis of a belief system. The temple's entire layout funnels visitors toward it, forcing them to confront the monstrous hybrid in claustrophobic closeness. Some researchers argue Chavín was less a place of worship than a theater of terror, where priests used architecture, drugs, and sound to stage divine encounters. The message was clear: submit or be devoured. Yet the greatest mystery isn't how they engineered this horror, it's why they stopped. By 500 BC, the site was abandoned, its rituals faded into myth. But the legacy lingers. Traces of Chavín's art and symbols appear hundreds of miles away, suggesting its cult spread like a fever before collapsing. Maybe the terror grew too much even for its creators. Or perhaps, like all good magic tricks, the illusion wore thin once the audience peeked behind the curtain. Either way, the stones still whisper warnings to those who listen. Some doors, once opened, should never be stepped through twice. Just east of modern-day St. Louis, where the Mississippi and Missouri rivers meet, the earth swells into a series of man-made mountains, remnants of a city that once rivaled medieval London in size. Cahokia, the greatest urban center of pre-Columbian North America, thrived between the years 900 and 1400 with a population that may have reached 40,000 at its peak. Its skyline was dominated by Monk's Mound, a colossal earthen pyramid larger at its base than Egypt's Great Pyramid of Giza. Yet by the time Europeans arrived, this bustling metropolis stood empty, its people vanished into the mists of history. What catastrophe could have toppled a civilization so advanced it engineered precise astronomical observatories centuries before telescopes existed? At the heart of the mystery lies Cahokia's Woodhenge, a circle of towering red cedar posts functioning as a sophisticated solar calendar. Archaeologists discovered that certain posts align perfectly with the sunrise during equinoxes and solstices, proving the Cahokians tracked celestial events with startling accuracy. But here's where it gets eerie. The largest wood henge, dating to around 1100, was dismantled abruptly and replaced with a structure oriented differently. Was this a sign of shifting religious beliefs or something darker? Soil samples from this period reveal traces of massive floods, suggesting climate upheaval may have disrupted the careful balance of Cahokia's agricultural society. Imagine the desperation, priests adjusting their sacred calendar again and again as unpredictable rains drowned crops, their ceremonies growing more frantic with each failed harvest. Then there are the Birdman tablets, carved slate slabs depicting a half-human, half-bird figure clutching a severed head. These artifacts hint at a violent underworld to Cahokia's glittering surface. Some scholars argue the Birdman represented a celestial deity linked to the wood henge's solar alignments, while others see evidence of a brutal warrior cult. Mass graves discovered near Mound 72 support this darker interpretation. Over 50 young women were buried there simultaneously, their bones showing signs of ritual sacrifice. Was Cahokia's collapse triggered by environmental disaster, or did spiraling religious extremism tear it apart from within? The truth may lie in both. Tree ring data shows a prolonged drought struck the region in the 1300s, around the time Cahokia emptied. But unlike the Maya, who left inscriptions boasting of their kings, Cahokia's rulers vanished without a written word. Recent LiDAR scans reveal something astonishing. The city didn't just depopulate gradually. Entire neighborhoods were systematically burned, as if in purification rituals. Perhaps the Birdman's followers, facing famine, escalated sacrifices to appease the gods until society buckled under the weight of their own fervor. Or maybe the people simply walked away, dispersing into smaller communities where the old ways faded into legend. Today, Cahokia's mounds stand as silent witnesses to a forgotten experiment in urban living. Unlike stone pyramids, these earthen structures will eventually erode, taking their secrets with them. But for now, they whisper a cautionary tale about what happens when nature, ideology, and human ambition collide, a story etched not in hieroglyphs, but in the very soil beneath our feet. In the mist-shrouded peaks of Colombia's Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, legends whisper of a civilization that vanished into the clouds, leaving behind not just ruins but a trail of gold. The Tairona people, masters of metallurgy and engineering, built terraced cities so high in the mountains that Spanish conquistadors could scarcely believe their eyes. When the first European explorers arrived in the 15th century, they wrote of encountering staircases carved into cliffs, bridges swaying over dizzying ravines, and temples glittering with gold ornaments. Yet within decades, these marvels were abandoned, their locations fading into myth. Were the Tairona's golden cities real, or just another El Dorado fantasy? The answer lies somewhere between obsession and archaeology. Take the story of Ciudad Perdida, the lost city, rediscovered in the 1970s by treasure hunters tracking rumors of gold. Hidden beneath centuries of jungle growth, its stone pathways and circular plazas revealed a settlement far grander than imagined, a metropolis of terraces climbing nearly 4,000 feet above sea level. But here's the twist: this wasn't some isolated outpost. LiDAR scans now suggest dozens of interconnected Tairona sites dot the mountains, linked by ancient roads wide enough for processions. The Spanish chronicles weren't exaggerating, they were simply describing the tip of a golden iceberg. Yet the real mystery isn't the city's existence, it's their purpose. Unlike the Maya or Inca, the Tairona left no written records. What we know comes from their artifacts, exquisite gold pendants depicting bat gods, intricate weaving tools, and finely tuned musical instruments. These weren't just crafts, they were cosmological blueprints. Modern Kogi people, believed to be the Tairona's descendants, still guard sacred sites in the Sierra Nevada, insisting their ancestors' cities were designed as living maps aligning Earth with the stars. Imagine a place where every staircase mirrored a celestial path, where the clink of gold ornaments in the wind was considered divine communication. The Spanish, of course, saw only loot. Records from 1599 describe soldiers melting down Torona gold by the ton, shipping it back to Europe as bullion, but the mountains fought back. Torrential rains, landslides, and guerrilla attacks from Torona warriors who famously poisoned their own gold to strike back at greedy invaders drove the Spaniards out. Within a generation, the cities were empty, their people retreated higher into the clouds. Some archaeologists argue the Torona chose disappearance over submission, dismantling bridges and letting the jungle reclaim their homes to protect their secrets. Today, the debate rages on. Are the remaining lost cities still hidden in the Sierra Nevada, or were they always more legend than reality? One clue might lie in the Kogi's warnings. They speak of a luna, a spiritual dimension where their ancestors still live, and claim the gold was never meant to be wealth, it was a conduit to the gods. Perhaps the true treasure wasn't the metal, but the knowledge of how to live in harmony with a mountain that could so easily swallow you whole. The Torona's greatest achievement wasn't their gold, it was knowing when to let the mist close behind them. On the sun-baked adobe walls of ancient Peru, the Moche people left behind a gallery of nightmares, vivid murals where gods decapitate prisoners, warriors duel to the death, and erotic scenes intertwine with grotesque rituals. These aren't just artistic flourishes, they're windows into a world view where violence and desire were threads in the same cosmic fabric. Discovered at sites like Huaca de la Luna and Huaca del Sol, these paintings raise a chilling question. Were the Moche documenting real events, or were they illustrating myths meant to terrify and enthrall? Start with the sacrifice ceremony mural, a sprawling masterpiece depicting the so-called decapitator god, a peak holding a crescent-shaped blade to a captive's throat. Archaeologists once assumed this was symbolic until they unearthed mass graves nearby. Skeletons showed identical trauma, slit throats, dismembered limbs, and skulls repurposed as ceremonial cups. The mural wasn't fantasy, it was a step-by-step manual. Chemical analysis of residue on ceremonial knives even matches traces of fermented blood, suggesting victims' remains were consumed in ritual cocktails. But why such brutality? Some scholars argue these acts were political theater, a way for rulers to showcase power by feeding the gods. Others point to El Niño's catastrophic floods. Evidence shows the Moche endured decades of climate chaos. Perhaps the sacrifices were desperate bargains to appease nature's fury. Then there's the erotic murals where gods and humans couple in explicit detail. Unlike Western traditions that separate sex and violence, the Moche fused them. One haunting scene shows a skeleton deity penetrating a living woman, an image once dismissed as myth until forensic studies revealed Moche women buried with pelvic fractures consistent with ritualized intercourse. The line between sacred and profane blurs here. These acts may have been offerings to ensure fertility in a land where rain was never guaranteed. The greatest twist lies in the mural's recurring motifs. The same characters, warriors, priests, deities appear across centuries, their stories evolving like episodes in a gruesome serial. Recent digital reconstructions reveal layers of paint beneath the surface, showing earlier, less violent versions of the same scenes. It's as if the Moche's mythology grew darker alongside their real-world struggles. So were these murals documentaries or propaganda? The answer might be both. Just as Roman emperors staged gladiator battles to distract from famine, the Moche's art could have been a tool of control, a reminder that chaos lurked beyond the temple walls and only their rulers could keep it at bay. The paint may have faded, but the message remains stark. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create to explain our own suffering. Beneath the emerald canopy of the Amazon rainforest, where the soil is typically so thin and nutrient-poor that farmers struggle to grow crops, patches of rich, dark earth defy expectations. This isn't ordinary dirt, it's terra preta or black earth, a man-made supersoil so fertile it regenerates itself over centuries. Scattered across the basin in deliberate clusters, these fertile islands reveal something astonishing. The Amazon wasn't just untouched wilderness before European contact. It was a carefully managed garden, cultivated by civilizations with agricultural knowledge we're only beginning to understand. The secret lies in the soil's composition. Unlike the region's naturally acidic, nutrient-leached earth, Terra Preta is packed with charcoal, pottery shards, fish bones, and plant matter, ancient compost engineered to last. Modern scientists have analyzed its structure and found microbiome activity up to 3 times higher than in surrounding soils. But here's what's truly remarkable. While regular compost decomposes within years, Terra Preta thrives over millennia. Farmers today still plant in these patches, reaping bountiful harvests from soil mixed by hands over 1,000 years gone. How did pre-Columbian cultures achieve this? The answer might lie in the Terra Preta's most puzzling ingredient, biochar. This charcoal-like substance, created by burning organic matter in low oxygen conditions, acts like a nutritional sponge, locking in minerals and moisture while attracting beneficial microbes. Studies show indigenous people likely used controlled burns, not the destructive slash and burn techniques of today, but precise, smoldering fires that transformed waste into agricultural gold. Imagine communities carefully layering kitchen scraps, broken ceramics, and charred plants into the earth, creating a self-sustaining loop where nothing was wasted. Yet the scale of these soil patches hints at something even grander. LiDAR scans have revealed vast networks of settlements beneath the Amazon's canopy, connected by raised roads and encircled by Terra Preta gardens. Some estimates suggest these fertile zones cover up to 10% of the basin, an area the size of France. This wasn't just subsistence farming, it was a continent-wide experiment in sustainability. The Chapo people, modern descendants of these ancient agriculturists, still practice a modified version of this technique, calling it mokamoka, a ritual of renewal that honors the soil as a living ancestor. What's haunting is how this knowledge nearly vanished. European diseases and colonization devastated Amazonian populations, and without caretakers, the jungle swallowed their cities. But the soil remembers. In the 21st century, scientists are racing to replicate Terra Preta as a solution to modern deforestation and climate change. If we could mass-produce this ancient recipe, it might help sequester carbon while feeding millions. The irony is profound. The so-called pristine Amazon holds a blueprint for humanity's survival, buried in the very earth we once dismissed as barren. The question isn't whether these civilizations were advanced, it's whether we're wise enough to learn from them. Twisting for nearly a quarter-mile across an Ohio river bluff, the Great Serpent Mound uncoils with eerie precision, its massive earthen body undulating in 7 graceful curves before culminating in a gaping spiral that some interpret as the serpent swallowing an egg or perhaps the sun itself. This ancient effigy, the largest of its kind in the world, raises questions that cut to the heart of North America's pre-Columbian past. Who shaped this land into such a deliberate spectacle, and what message were they sending across the centuries? For decades, archaeologists attributed the mound to the Adena culture, a people known for their burial mounds who thrived between 800 BC and 100 CE. The serpent's alignment with the summer solstice sunset seemed to support this, a celestial signature consistent with other Adena earthworks. But in the 1990s, radiocarbon dating of charcoal samples threw the timeline into chaos. The results pointed to the Fort Ancient culture, a group that flourished nearly 1,000 years after the Adena. Suddenly, the serpent had 2 possible creators separated by centuries, each with radically different worldviews. The astronomical clues only deepen the debate. The serpent's coiled tail aligns precisely with the summer solstice sunset, while its head points to the winter solstice sunrise. Some researchers argue these alignments couldn't be accidental. not in a structure requiring over 300,000 cubic feet of soil, painstakingly carried basket by basket. But here's where it gets complicated. The Adena were known for lunar alignments, while the fort ancient people tracked solar cycles more closely. Worse still, 19th century reconstruction efforts may have accidentally altered the mound's original orientation, muddying the evidence. Then there's the serpent symbolism. In Adena art, serpents often represented portals to the underworld, guardians of sacred knowledge. The fort ancient, by contrast, left behind depictions of horned serpents linked to celestial events like the legendary Great Serpent of Cherokee oral tradition said to control eclipses. Could the mound be a prayer etched into the earth, begging for balance between sky and underworld? Or was it a territorial marker, its sinuous form visible for miles, warning outsiders to tread carefully? Modern technology offers tantalizing hints. Ground-penetrating radar reveals the mound sits atop a prehistoric meteorite impact crater, a fact its builders likely knew given the area's exposed bedrock and magnetic anomalies. Some scholars suggest the serpent was placed here deliberately, its body tracing underground fissures where the Earth's energy was believed to gather. Others propose it was a colossal compass, its curves mirroring the nearby Ohio River's bends as a navigational aid. What lingers most isn't the uncertainty of its origins, but the sheer ambition. This wasn't just a mound, it was a cosmological statement, a bridge between realms built by hands we still can't definitively name. Whether Adena or Fort Ancient, they left behind a riddle coiled in plain sight, one that still hisses softly to those who walk its spine. Buried in the arid sands of Peru's Paracas Peninsula, the mummies defy every expectation. With their fiery red hair, pale skin, and strikingly elongated skulls, these preserved corpses look like they wandered straight out of Celtic folklore only to collapse in the wrong hemisphere. Known as the Tarim mummies, though unrelated to their Central Asian namesakes, these remains have ignited decades of controversy. How did individuals with distinctly Caucasian features end up wrapped in intricate textiles and buried beneath the South American desert over 2,000 years ago? The answers, much like the mummies themselves, refuse to fit neatly into any conventional narrative. Take the skulls first. Unlike the flattened foreheads of artificially deformed heads found in other ancient cultures, the Paracas skulls are naturally elongated, with cranial volumes up to 25% larger than average. Some researchers argue this points to an unknown human subspecies, while others dismiss it as genetic mutation. But here's the twist. DNA analysis published in 2014 revealed mitochondrial haplogroups common in Western Eurasia, markers tracing back to regions like the Black Sea and Caucasus Mountains. These weren't isolated anomalies, they were part of a population with deep European roots. The discovery sent shockwaves through archaeology, challenging long-held theories about pre-Columbian migration. If these people crossed the Atlantic or Pacific millennia before Columbus, why does no record of their journey exist? The textiles wrapping the mummies deepen the enigma. Woven with patterns resembling motifs from ancient Crete and Anatolia, the fabrics feature dyes made from rare coastal plants, evidence the weavers had intimate knowledge of both distant cultures and local ecology. Even more perplexing, the burial style. The bodies were placed in basket-like cradles, a practice unseen elsewhere in the Americas but eerily similar to Bronze Age burials in the Caucasus. Coincidence unlikely. The sheer accumulation of parallels suggests deliberate cultural transmission, not random convergence. Mainstream scholars propose these individuals were part of a maritime trading network, perhaps shipwrecked or blown off course. Yet alternative theories abound. Some point to the mummies' high arsenic levels consistent with metalworking and speculate they were part of a Bronze Age prospector colony hunting for tin or copper. Others, citing oral traditions from the Andes, suggest they were the legendary Huares, a white god people said to have taught irrigation and masonry before vanishing. The most haunting question isn't how they arrived, but what became of them. Genetic studies of modern indigenous Peruvians show no traces of this Eurasian lineage, meaning the bloodline died out completely. Were they massacred, assimilated beyond recognition, or did they simply fade into the dunes, leaving behind only their silent, stretched skulls as monuments to a forgotten voyage? Until we uncover more, the Paracas mummies remain a taunt, a whisper from the sands that history's map may need redrawing. The story begins with a room 22 feet long, 17 feet wide, packed floor to ceiling with gold. That was the ransom demanded by Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro in 1532 for the Inca Emperor Atahualpa, his prisoner. The deal was simple: fill this chamber once with gold, twice with silver, and Atahualpa would walk free. For months, caravans streamed across the empire, delivering intricate golden statues, ceremonial knives, and even sheets peeled from temple walls. Then, just as the final treasures arrived, Pizarro broke his word. Atahualpa was executed, the gold melted into ingots, and a legend was born that somewhere in the Andes, a second fortune greater than the ransom still lies hidden. The most tantalizing clue comes from a conquistador's deathbed confession. In 1575, a Spaniard named Valverde claimed to have found the treasure in Ecuador's Langanates Mountains, a mist-choked wilderness of jagged peaks and bottomless swamps. His directions, scribbled in a document now called the Derrotero de Valverde, read like a fever dream: follow a lake shaped like a chessboard, pass through a canyon where echoes don't return, and there, beneath a waterfall, lies a cave glittering with gold. For centuries, adventurers have vanished trying to decode this riddle. In the 1980s, explorer Barth Blake swore he found the hoard, only to slip from a cliff days later. His final letter, mailed before his death, described golden birds with emerald eyes and life-sized llamas cast in pure silver. Modern technology has only deepened the enigma. Satellite imagery reveals unnatural plateaus in the Langanates that could be collapsed tunnels, while ground-penetrating radar detects metallic anomalies beneath glacial lakes. Yet the mountains guard their secrets viciously. The region's weather shifts from blistering sun to freezing fog in minutes and quicks, and lurks beneath mossy bogs. Local legends speak of Apu's mountain spirits who drown intruders in sudden storms. Even science hints at something eerie. The Langanates sit atop intersecting fault lines, emitting low-frequency sounds that disorient climbers. But the real twist isn't just lost gold, it's what the Inca might have hidden with it. Chronicler Pedro Cieza de Leon wrote that Atahualpa's generals smuggled out not just treasures but sacred quippers, the knotted cords that may hold the empire's untranslated history. If found, these could rewrite everything we know about the Andes' greatest civilization. For now, the gold and the truth remain just out of reach, buried beneath layers of myth and mud. The mountains keep their bargain. You can seek, but you may not return to tell. Hidden in the vaults of the Vatican Library lies a manuscript so enigmatic, its pages seem to vibrate with prophetic energy. The Codex Borgia, a pre-Columbian Aztec document painted on deerskin, isn't just a relic, it's a ticking cosmic clock. Its vibrant, hallucinogenic illustrations depict gods tearing apart the fabric of reality, celestial snakes devouring the sun, and a feathered serpent rising from the ashes of a broken world. But here's what chills scholars to the bone. Sections of this codex read less like mythology and more like a countdown to catastrophe. Could these vivid scenes foretell an actual Aztec doomsday prophecy, or were they warnings about the cataclysm already unfolding as Europeans arrived on their shores? The most haunting section is the Tonalpohualli, the sacred 260-day calendar, which maps out cycles of creation and destruction. One page shows Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god of wisdom, shedding his own skin while flames consume a pyramid. Beneath him, a trail of footprints leads into a star-filled void. Modern researchers like Elizabeth Boone argue this isn't just symbolic, it's a precise astronomical alignment. The Serpent's Path mirrors the Milky Way's position during the spring equinox in the year 1512, the very year Hernan Cortés landed in Mexico. To the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma, Cortés' arrival seemed like an uncanny fulfillment. A pale, bearded stranger arriving from the east, just as legends predicted Quetzalcoatl would return. But the Codex's true terror lies in its layers of ambiguity. Flip further and you'll find the Zu-po-hualli, a 52-year cycle where the world hangs in balance. Every half-century, Aztec priests performed the new fire ceremony atop Mount Huexachtlan, watching the Pleiades constellation. If the stars kept moving, life would continue. If they froze, it meant the fifth sun, their current era, was ending. The Borgia's illustrations of this ritual are drenched in blood. Priests hold still beating hearts toward the sky, their faces twisted between hope and horror. Some scholars, like David Carrasco, suggest these weren't just rituals of renewal, they were desperate attempts to postpone apocalypse, bargaining with gods who'd already decided humanity's fate. Then there's the disputed eclipse dragon page, where a skeletal beast swallows the sun while warriors collapse mid-battle. Glyphs nearby reference Nahui Olan, or form movement, the Aztec concept of cyclical destruction. Yet recent infrared scans revealed erased annotations beneath the paint, a scribe's frantic corrections, as if recalculating doom. Could this depict the total solar eclipse of 1496, an event so traumatic it's recorded in multiple Mesoamerican codices? Or was it a premonition of the Spanish conquest, where metal-clad dragons' cannons literally devoured the Aztec world? The debate turns even thornier when you consider the Codex's origins. Unlike most surviving Aztec manuscripts, the Borgia wasn't commissioned by Spanish priests, it was hidden from them. Its art style suggests it came from the Puebla-Tlaxcala region, home to the Tlaxcalans, the Aztecs' bitter enemies who later allied with Cortés. Some historians speculate this prophecy might have been political sabotage, a crafted omen meant to destabilize Moctezuma's reign by convincing him resistance was futile. Yet for all the theories, the Borgia's greatest power is its unanswered question. Do civilizations collapse because prophecies foretell it, or because people believe them enough to make them real? The Codex survives as a mirror, reflecting our own obsession with destiny, whether etched in stars, whispered by gods, or inked onto fragile deerskin, daring us to decode the end before it comes. When the Aztec emperors spoke of Tolan, their voices dipped into reverence, describing a golden city where wise rulers walked with gods, and artisans crafted wonders beyond mortal skill. But here's the puzzle. By the time the Aztecs rose to power in the 14th century, Tolan had already crumbled into myth. So when they pointed to the ruins of Chala north of modern Mexico City and declared it the legendary Tolan, were they preserving history or rewriting it? The truth might lie in the shadows of another, even grander city, Teotihuacan. Start with Chala. Its towering Atlantean warrior statues and serpent-columned temples certainly fit the Aztec descriptions of Tolan as a place of unmatched artistry. The city thrived between the years 900 and 1200, peaking just before the Aztecs' arrival, but dig deeper and contradictions emerge. Aztec texts describe Tolan's rulers as masters of magic sorcerers who could summon storms and transform into animals. Chala's archaeology, though impressive, shows no evidence of such supernatural prowess. Worse still, its downfall was messy. Burned temples and shattered sculptures suggest a violent end, hardly the graceful decline befitting a city of legend. Then there's Teotihuacan. A century before Chala's rise, this metropolis dominated Mesoamerica with its colossal pyramids of the sun and moon. By the time the Aztecs discovered its ruins, they were so awestruck they called it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. The alignment is uncanny. Tolan's mythical founders, the Toltecs, were said to have descended from the god Quetzalcoatl, the same deity worshipped at Teotihuacan centuries earlier. Even the layout mirrors Aztec descriptions. broad avenues, precise astronomical alignments, and workshops producing iridescent feathers and obsidian blades. But why would the Aztecs shift the Tolan legend to Chala politics? Claiming descent from the illustrious Toltecs legitimized their rule. Chala, being smaller and more recent, was easier to co-opt than the enigmatic Teotihuacan, whose original name and rulers were already lost to time. The Aztecs weren't just remembering history, they were curating it, stitching their empire's prestige to a carefully edited past. Modern archaeology adds another layer. Excavations at Teotihuacan reveal murals of a feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl's precursor, while Chala's art leans toward militaristic eagles. The difference is stark. One city revered wisdom, the other war. Maybe Tolan was never a single place but an ideal, a dream of civilization so potent that both cities, in their own ways, tried to claim it. The stones won't confess, but their silence speaks volumes. Sometimes the greatest cities aren't built of brick, but of stories we refuse to let die. In the ruins of Chan Chan, the ancient capital of the Chimu Empire, the walls don't just stand, they sing. When coastal winds whip through the labyrinthine corridors of this sprawling adobe city, a chorus of high-pitched whistles and chirps fills the air as if flocks of invisible birds have nested in the bricks. This isn't erosion, or Chinese letter, it's acoustics carved into the very design. Archaeologists studying the site's towering walls have discovered something extraordinary, precise grooves and perforations that transform wind into melody. But the real question isn't how they did it, it's why. Were these sonic walls accidental genius, or did the Chimu deliberately engineer a city that harmonized with the elements? The mechanics are deceptively simple. Chan Chan's walls feature rows of small, strategically placed holes aligned at specific angles. As wind passes through, it creates vibrations, much like blowing across the mouth of a bottle, producing tones ranging from soft hums to sharp trills. What's astonishing is the consistency. Tests with modern replicas confirm these sounds aren't random. They follow scales reminiscent of Andean musical traditions, suggesting an intentional auditory palette. Some researchers, like acoustic archaeologist Miriam Kohler, argue the walls functioned as a giant wind instrument, turning the city itself into a performance space during seasonal festivals. Imagine standing in a plaza as the summer solstice wind rolls in, the walls erupting in a symphony controlled not by human hands but by the breath of the gods. Yet the bird-like quality of these sounds raises deeper questions. The Chimu revered avian deities, particularly seabirds like pelicans and cormorants, which appear in their art as messengers between earth and sky. Could the walls have been designed to mimic these sacred creatures, creating the illusion of a city alive with divine presence? Supporting this theory, excavations have uncovered ceremonial courtyards where the acoustics are most pronounced, spaces where priests might have interpreted the bird songs as oracles. A broken pottery shard found near the Tishudi Palace bears an inscription in Qingnam, the lost language of the Chimu, that translates roughly to "the wind speaks in feathers." But skeptics counter that the sounds could be a happy accident. Adobe, the primary building material, is porous and prone to erosion. Perhaps centuries of wind sculpted the holes naturally. Yet this ignores the Chimu's documented mastery of hydraulic engineering. Their canals and reservoirs were feats of precision. If they could control water flow across miles of desert, why not harness the wind's music? The clincher might lie in the wall's deterioration. As restoration teams work to stabilize the site, they've noticed something eerie, patches where modern repairs silence the sounds completely. The original builders, it seems, knew exactly what they were doing. What lingers isn't just the mystery of craftsmanship, but the purpose. In a culture without written records, these walls may have been a living archive, a way to encode knowledge in sound, ensuring that even if the empire fell, its voice would endure. Today, as visitors walk Chan Chan's sun-baked corridors, the the wind still murmurs through the bricks, a whisper from a civilization that understood the air itself could be shaped into song. The real marvel isn't that the walls sing, but that someone, centuries ago, decided they should. Etched into the sandstone cliffs of Chaco Canyon, the spiral petroglyphs seem to pulse with hidden meaning, their coiled forms more like portals than mere carvings. These intricate designs, left by the ancestral Pueblones over 1,000 years ago, cluster near sites like Fajoda Butte, where sunlight and shadow perform an annual dance across the rock. But are these spirals simple decorations or celestial maps guiding initiates through cosmic thresholds? The most famous example, the Sun Dagger petroglyph, offers a compelling clue. At summer solstice, a blade of sunlight slices precisely through the center of a carved spiral, while winter solstice frames it with twin daggers of light. This isn't random. The alignment's precision suggests generations of astronomical observation. Yet some researchers, like astronomer John Carlson, argue the spirals may represent more than calendar markers. In Pueblo cosmology, spirals symbolize emergence, the journey from underground worlds to the present one. Modern Hopi elders describe similar petroglyphs as sipapuni, spiritual doorways where shamans could traverse realms. Another twist comes from the carving's acoustics. Recent studies reveal that certain spirals resonate at specific frequencies when struck or chanted near, creating echoes that seem to enter the rock. At Wijiji, a ruin near multiple spiral sites, archaeologists found cylindrical ceramic vessels placed in niches, tools that might have amplified ritual sounds. Picture this, a priest humming at a precise pitch, the spiral humming back, the very air vibrating as if thinning the veil between worlds. But the most haunting theory connects the spirals to Chaco's great houses. These massive structures, like Pueblo Bonito, align with lunar standstills events occurring every 18.6 years when the moon pauses at its northernmost or southernmost rise. Could the spirals be lunar receivers, marking moments when celestial energy was believed to flow strongest? Supporting this, several spirals appear alongside carved crescents, while others are positioned where moonlight strikes during rare lunar events. Yet for all their precision, the spirals resist absolute interpretation. Some face east, aligned with sunrise, while others point to canyon features invisible from ground level. A few even intersect with ancient peck trails, paths that might have been pilgrimage routes or processional ways. The ambiguity feels intentional, as if the Pueblones designed them to be read differently by initiates and outsiders. What endures is the sense of motion. Unlike static symbols, these spirals seem to twist if you stare long enough, pulling the eye inward toward some unfathomable center. Whether they mapped the heavens, channeled voices from the underworld, or simply marked where the earth's breath met the sky's fire, one truth remains. In Chaco Canyon, stone doesn't just remember, it listens. Standing in the shadow of Monte Albán's Grand Pyramids, the Danzante stones unsettle even seasoned archaeologists. These weathered slabs, carved with twisted figures caught in grotesque contortions, seem to writhe under the Mexican sun, their mouths gaping, limbs bent at impossible angles, genitals sometimes flayed or exposed. The Spanish called them danzantes, dancers, mistaking their agony for movement. But modern scholars grapple with a darker truth. Are these portraits of enemies tortured in victory rites, sacrificial offerings frozen mid-scream, or perhaps something even more unexpected, ancient medical textbooks etched in stone? The war captives theory holds weight when you examine the context. Over 300 of these carvings cluster near Monte Albán's earliest structures, dating to between 500 and 200 BCE, when the Zapotec kingdom was consolidating power through brutal conquest. Some slabs show figures with explicitly labeled names and places towns the Zapotec defeated. Their poses mirror later Aztec depictions of prisoners, bound and humiliated before execution. A few even display glyphs resembling weapons, arrows piercing thighs, ropes cinching necks, yet inconsistencies linger. Why would a rising empire spend resources carving such elaborate humiliation instead of simple victory stelae? Unless the purpose wasn't just propaganda but warning, that's where the medical record theory takes a startling turn. In the 1970s, anthropologist Javier Urcid noticed something peculiar. Many contortions match modern diagnostic descriptions of congenital diseases or neurological disorders. One figure arches backward unnaturally, reminiscent of advanced cerebral palsy. Another's splayed fingers suggest syndactyly or fused digits. Even the genital mutilations could depict hernias or tumors common in ancient populations. If true, these stones might be the earliest known medical illustrations in the Americas, documenting conditions the Zapotec attributed to divine punishment or cosmic imbalance. Supporting this, several carvings appear near structures believed to be healing temples, where priests may have used them as teaching aids. But the darkest interpretation bridges both ideas, ritual and medicine intertwined. Among the most haunting slabs is a figure with an elongated skull and exposed ribs, his abdomen carved with an intricate spiral, a symbol later associated with the Zapotec rain god Casillo. Could this represent a captive turned sacrificial canvas, his body marked to channel divine power? Modern Mixtec communities still recount legends of speaking stones, where the dying transferred knowledge to rock through their final breath. Perhaps the danzantes were neither purely political nor clinical, but both, a fusion of conquest, curation, and communion with the gods. The stones resist easy answers. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Maya stelae, Zapotec glyphs remain only partially deciphered, their full messages locked in silent stone. What's clear is the intentionality. These weren't casual graffiti. Each figure required days of meticulous pecking into granite, a labor reserved for matters of life, death, or eternity. Whether warning enemies, training healers, or capturing the moment when a soul crossed between worlds, the danzantes whisper one certainty. In Monte Alban's heyday, power wasn't just taken, it was carved into the very bones of the earth. High in the Andes, where jagged peaks slice through the clouds, the ruins of Huey whisper an unsettling truth. Civilizations don't always collapse with a bang. Sometimes they just walk away. At the empire's capital, near modern-day Ayacucho, archaeologists uncovered a puzzle frozen in time, pottery still resting on hearths, half-woven textiles abandoned on looms, even preserved meals left to rot in communal kitchens. It's as if 20,000 people vanished mid-breath, leaving behind a city suspended between life and oblivion. What force could have driven an empire that once rivaled the Inca to flee so abruptly? The answer might lie in dust, bones, and a climate disaster we're only now beginning to understand. Start with the kitchens. Excavations at Huey's urban core revealed something bizarre. Dozens of clay pots containing charred remnants of potatoes and maize, their chemical signatures matching sudden high-temperature burns. At first, researchers assumed invaders had torched the city until they noticed the lack of weapon damage or mass graves. Then came the sediment cores from nearby Lake Huacape, telling a different story. Layers of dust deposited around the year 1000 reveal a catastrophic drought lasting decades, punctuated by freak El Niño floods. The timing matches Huey's abandonment perfectly. But here's what's chilling: those kitchen fires weren't arson. They were last-ditch attempts to parch damp grain before it molded in unseasonal rains, a desperate act before the final exodus. The empire's sheer scale makes its collapse even more haunting. At its height, Huey's road network stretched over 900 miles, connecting mountain terraces to coastal farms. Their engineers built reservoirs and canals so advanced they're still used today. Yet pollen samples tell a grim story. Crop yields plummeted as the drought wore on, with maize harvest shrinking by 80% in the empire's final decades. Skeletal remains from this period show stunted growth and anemia, markers of prolonged famine, but the real smoking gun, Huey's signature Morado potatoes. These purple tubers, bred to withstand cold, couldn't adapt to the drought's relentless heat. When their staple crop failed, the social contract shattered. Yet the most compelling evidence isn't in the ruins, it's in what the wary chose to take. Unlike other collapsed civilizations, they didn't strip their city bare. Intact storerooms held caches of precious spondylus shells used as currency, while workshops left behind unfinished jewelry. This suggests no planned migration, but a tipping point reached in real time. Some researchers argue a final, failed monsoon season triggered panic, sending citizens streaming down the empire's own roads in search of surviving farmland. Others point to the strategic burning of administrative buildings, not by enemies, but by wary elites destroying records as their authority crumbled. What lingers isn't just the mystery of why they left, but where they went. Linguistic studies of modern Quechua dialects hint at wary refugees dispersing into the Andes, their knowledge blending into Inca traditions centuries later. Perhaps their greatest legacy wasn't the city they abandoned, but the lesson etched into its empty streets, that even the mightiest empires are just one failed harvest away from becoming ghosts. The stones don't mourn, they wait, daring us to read the warning written in dust and ashes. Off the southwest coast of Florida, where the Gulf's turquoise waters dissolve into mangrove labyrinths, the Calusa built an empire not of stone, but of shell. Millions upon millions of crushed mollusk remains piled into artificial islands, towering causeways, and even sacred temples. While Europe was erecting cathedrals, these so-called shell Indians engineered a civilization that thrived entirely on seafood, defying every expectation of what an agricultural society should be. How did a people who rejected farming, who never tilled a single field, command a territory larger than some European kingdoms? The answer lies in their radical adaptation to water, a mastery so complete it turned the tides against invaders for centuries. At its heart was Mound Key, the Calusa capital, a 60-acre island sculpted from conch, whelk, and oyster shells hauled basket by basket from the seafloor. Today, the mounds still rise 30 feet above the waves, their layers packed with clues, fish bones by the ton, scales from massive feasts, and tools carved from shark teeth, proof of a maritime economy so efficient it supported 20,000 people. But the real genius wasn't just what they built, but where. The Calusa positioned their shell islands like chess pieces, controlling tidal channels where fish migrated seasonally. Spanish accounts describe canals wide enough for 50 canoes abreast, suggesting a transportation network rivaling Venice's. Then there's the warfare. When Ponce de Leon arrived in 1513, expecting an easy conquest, the Calusa didn't just resist, they dominated. Chronicles tell of warriors ambushing Spanish ships from hidden mangrove passages, using tidal knowledge to trap vessels on submerged oyster bars. Some scholars argue they even engineered waterborne bioweapons, deliberately polluting Spanish drinking water with rotting fish, a tactic later documented among other Gulf tribes. Their arrows, tipped with stingray spines, caused wounds that festered in the tropical heat. One Spanish priest lamented that the Calusa's hit-and-run tactics made them unbeatable unless the very sea could be drained. But the greatest mystery isn't their military prowess, it's their spiritual relationship with the ocean. Excavations reveal water courts, shell-lined pools where captive dolphins were reportedly kept, possibly for rituals. A ceremonial mask carved from a single sea turtle shell depicts a face with half-human, half-fish features. Most haunting are the charnel houses, described by Spanish captives, buildings where bones of the dead were stored in curated arrangements, as if the Calusa believed the deceased could still navigate the tides of the afterlife. By the 1700s, disease and slave raids had erased the Calusa as a distinct people, yet their legacy lingers in the oddest places. Modern satellite imagery shows their shell mounds dotting the coast like stepping stones, subtly altering local currents to create rich fishing grounds still used today. The lesson isn't just about resilience, it's about redefining power. While other civilizations measured might in acres of corn or tons of gold, the Calusa proved true dominion could be carved from something as fleeting as a seashell and as boundless as the sea itself. Perched on sheer cliffs in Peru's remote Amazonas region, the sarcophagi of the Chachapoya stare defiantly across the clouds, elongated sentinels of clay and straw, their painted faces weathered but unbroken. These eerie tombs, clinging to vertigo-inducing ledges, hold the remains of a people who called themselves the warriors of the clouds, a civilization so fierce even the mighty Inca struggled to conquer them. But it's what's inside these cliffside coffins that upends history. Mummies with striking European-like features, fair skin, blonde hair, and towering statures that contradict every textbook image of pre-Columbian South America. Who were these enigmatic warriors, and why did they go to such extremes to defy gravity even in death? The first shock comes from the mummies themselves. When archaeologists carefully opened one of the sarcophagi at the site of Cahokia, they found a 6-foot-tall man with reddish blonde hair, his skin preserved by the cool, dry mountain air. Spanish chronicles from the 1500s describe the Chachapoya as the whitest and most handsome of all the peoples we've seen, with some warriors so pale they were mistaken for ghosts by Inca soldiers. Genetic testing reveals a complicated story. While their DNA is unmistakably indigenous, certain traits like lighter hair may have resulted from isolation or ritual dyeing with plant extracts. Yet the real mystery isn't their appearance but their defiance. These tombs weren't hidden, they were displayed, perched on cliffs visible for miles, as if taunting invaders to try and reach them. And try the Inca did. By the late 1400s, the empire had swallowed most of the Andes until they hit the cloud forests of Chachapoyas. The battles were brutal. Inca General Tupac Yupanqui's journals describe fortress cities like Calilap, where Chachapoya warriors rained boulders and fire from massive stone walls. But the Chachapoya's greatest weapon was the land itself. Their sarcophagi were placed on cliffs accessible only by rope ladders, which they burned behind them during retreats. When the Inca finally broke through after decades of war, they did something unprecedented. Instead of erasing the Chachapoya, they absorbed them. Inca nobles married Chachapoya women, perhaps hoping to claim their legendary fierceness by blood. Some sarcophagi even show Inca-style patterns layered over older Chachapoya designs, a silent testament to this uneasy fusion. Yet the tombs guard their deepest secret, the Chachapoya's obsession with elevation. Unlike coastal cultures who buried their dead underground, these warriors chose the sky. Anthropologist Adriana von Hagen suggests the cliffside placements weren't just defensive, they were spiritual. The Chachapoya saw clouds as a bridge between worlds, and their dead as sentinels guarding that threshold. Modern shamans in the region still speak of Puran Machu, the ancient ones whose spirits ride the mist. What lingers isn't just the mystery of their origins, but their defiance. Even in death, the warriors of the clouds refused to be conquered, their bodies forever suspended between earth and heaven. The sarcophagi stand today as they did centuries ago, silent, unyielding, and forever out of reach. Beneath the towering pyramid of the feathered serpent in Teotihuacan, the earth holds a grim secret, a mass grave so vast it rewrote our understanding of Mesoamerican ritual sacrifice. When archaeologists first tunneled into the pyramid's foundations in the 1980s, they uncovered a burial site unlike any other. Over 200 skeletons, each with hands bound behind their backs, arranged in eerie symmetry. Some wore necklaces of human jawbones, others were adorned with shells from distant coasts, but the most chilling detail, these weren't enemy warriors captured in battle. They were young men, carefully selected and dressed in identical uniforms, their bodies positioned as if part of a macabre choreography. What kind of ritual demanded such orchestrated slaughter? And why here, beneath a temple dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, the gentle feathered serpent god of wisdom? The scale of the sacrifice defies easy explanation. Radiocarbon dating places the burials around the year 200, when Teotihuacan was at its zenith, a cosmopolitan metropolis rivaling ancient Rome. The victims' teeth tell a haunting story. Isotopes reveal they came from far-flung regions of Mexico, suggesting they were brought to the city specifically for this purpose. Yet their bones show no signs of malnutrition or abuse, implying they were well-fed and cared for before their deaths. Some researchers, like archaeologist Saburo Sugiyama, argue this points to a form of gifted sacrifice where communities offered their strongest youths as part of a sacred covenant. Imagine the scene: processions of captives marching willingly to their fate, believing their deaths would sustain the cosmic order. Then there's the pyramid itself, a structure that seems to contradict its own violence. Unlike the Aztecs' blood-soaked Templo Maya, the feathered serpent pyramid's facade is adorned with graceful carvings of Quetzalcoatl undulating through clouds and water, symbols of creation and renewal. How does this align with the brutality beneath? The answer might lie in the victims' precise arrangement. They weren't dumped haphazardly. They were buried in groups of 18, a number sacred to Mesoamerican calendars and positioned to mirror the pyramid's architectural tiers. This wasn't random violence, it was cosmological engineering, a way to anchor the temple's spiritual power through ritual symmetry. But the deepest mystery isn't the why but the how. Chemical analysis of the soil revealed traces of a potent hallucinogen, likely administered to the victims before death. Their bound hands suggest passive submission, not struggle. Were they drugged into tranquility, their deaths framed as a transcendent passage rather than an execution? Modern Nahua descendants speak of Ixiptla, a sacred being who stood in for the gods during rituals, willingly surrendering their humanity to become divine vessels. Perhaps these men were seen not as casualties but as conduits, their sacrifice a thread stitching heaven to earth. Today, the pyramid stands as a paradox, a monument to both beauty and brutality, where the same hands that carved flowing serpents also bound hundreds to their doom. The stones offer no easy answers, only whispers of a world view where life and death weren't opposites but partners in an endless dance. To walk its corridors is to tread the line between reverence and horror, wondering which side truly held the power. Rising like a stone crown atop the Andes, the fortress of Culap defies logic, a citadel of round houses and towering walls perched at 3,000 meters, where the air thins and the clouds cling to the mountains. While Machu Picchu's elegance steals the spotlight, Culap's brute strength whispers a different story. Built by the Chachapoya, the so-called warriors of the clouds, this fortress isn't just a place to live. It's a statement carved into the cliffs, a challenge to the very landscape. But why here, in this mist-shrouded realm where every breath is a battle? The answer might lie in the stones themselves. Start with the walls. Culap's outer defenses stretch 60 feet high in places, built from limestone slabs so precisely fitted that not even a blade of grass could wedge between them. Unlike Machu Picchu's terraces, which blend harmoniously with the mountain, Culap's architecture is defiant, its sheer bulk dominating the ridge like a clenched fist. Archaeologists estimate the complex required 40 million cubic feet of stone, 3 times the volume of Egypt's Great Pyramid. Yet the Chachapoya had no beasts of burden, no wheels, no metal tools. Every block was hauled uphill by hand, a feat of endurance that borders on obsession. Then there's the mystery of the round houses. Over 400 circular dwellings cluster inside Culap's walls, their curved walls starkly different from the rectangular buildings of the Inca. Some scholars argue this design wasn't just cultural preference, it was survival. In a region battered by winds and landslides, rounded structures withstand forces that would topple angular ones. But the real clue lies in the details. Many houses feature carved friezes of serpents and jaguars, symbols later found in Chachapoya sarcophagi. This wasn't just a fortress, it was a sanctuary where the living walked among the motifs of their gods. The altitude adds another layer of intrigue. At 3,000 meters, Cuelap sits higher than Machu Picchu, in a zone where frost and fog are constant threats. Why choose such an inhospitable perch? The Chachapoya's enemies may hold the answer. By the time the Inca marched north in the 15th century, Cuelap had already stood for centuries, its elevation offering a strategic advantage, not just defensively but psychologically. Imagine Inca soldiers already struggling with the thin air, staring up at those impenetrable walls wreathed in clouds. The message was clear: you may conquer the valleys, but the sky belongs to us. Yet Cuelap's greatest secret isn't its height or its walls, it's what's missing. Unlike other Andean citadels, Cuelap shows no signs of siege or violent takeover. When the Chachapoya finally abandoned it, they left behind intact granaries, undisturbed tombs. Some researchers believe the fortress was never meant to be a permanent home, but a ceremonial stronghold, a place where the warriors of the clouds could touch the heavens without ever truly leaving the earth. The stones don't boast of battles won. They murmur of a people who built not out of fear but reverence, their fortress less a shield than an altar to the sky itself. Stretching across Ohio's river valleys like a stargazer's blueprint, the geometric earthworks of the Hopewell culture aren't just mounds, they're a celestial map etched into the very soil. These precise circles, squares, and octagons, some spanning hundreds of feet, align with moonrises, solstices, and star patterns with an accuracy that rivals modern observatories. But the real marvel isn't just their connection to the cosmos, it's how this ancient society, flourishing between 200 BC and 500 CE, wove astronomy, commerce, and spirituality into a single, sprawling tapestry that stretched from the Great Lakes to the Rocky Mountains. Take the Newark earthworks, a complex so vast it once covered 4 square miles. Its central octagon aligns perfectly with the moon's northernmost rise, an event that occurs only once every 18.6 years. For the Hopewell, this wasn't just a calendar, it was a sacred heartbeat, a rhythm that dictated when to plant, when to trade, and when to gather for rituals. Excavations reveal pits filled with charred seeds and ceremonial pipes, suggesting these enclosures were stages for celestial dramas where priests channeled the moon's power. Yet what's truly astonishing is the scale of their vision. These earthworks weren't isolated, they formed a network, with sites like Chillicot's high bank works mirroring Newark's alignments across dozens of miles, as if the land itself were a grand celestial instrument. But the Hopewell's reach extended far beyond starlight. Buried beneath these mounds are treasures that tell a different story. Obsidian from Wyoming's Yellowstone, conch shells from Florida's Gulf Coast, copper from Michigan's Upper Peninsula. This wasn't random loot, it was the heartbeat of a trading empire. Chemical analysis reveals that Yellowstone obsidian, prized for its razor-sharp edges, traveled nearly 2,000 miles to reach Hopewell sites. How? Through an intricate web of river routes and hand-to-hand exchanges, where goods passed between communities like ceremonial gifts rather than commodities. Some archaeologists argue these objects weren't just traded, they were pilgrimaged, carried by devotees to be buried in earthworks as offerings to the sky. The genius of the Hopewell lies in their synthesis. At Mound City, for instance, copper effigies of animal spirits, bears, birds, serpents were placed in graves alongside celestial-aligned artifacts, blending earthly and cosmic realms. Even their burial practices reflected this duality. Some skeletons were arranged to face specific constellations, while others were interred with mica mirrors, perhaps meant to catch and reflect starlight. This wasn't just a culture that watched the skies, they lived by them, turning the earth into a mirror of the heavens. Yet the most haunting question isn't how they built these wonders, it's why they stopped. By the 6th century, the earthworks were abandoned, their precise alignments left to the weeds. Climate shifts, overhunting, or social upheaval may have played a role, but the Hopewell left no written records, only their silent geometry. Today, their mounds endure as a paradox, monuments to both extraordinary precision and elusive purpose. Were they temples, observatories, or something we've yet to imagine? The earth keeps its secrets, but the stars still whisper to those who walk these sacred paths at dawn, tracing alignments older than the constellations themselves. Stretching along the walls of a remote Patagonian canyon, the Cueva de los Manos Cave of Hands holds a gallery of the past so intimate it feels like the walls themselves are reaching out to you. Over 900 stenciled hands, some painted more than 9,000 years ago, press against the rock in red, white, black, and ochre, their fingers splayed as if frozen mid-gesture. But these aren't random markings. The sheer density, hands overlapping hands, some missing fingers, others smaller than a child's, suggests a purpose far deeper than decoration. Were they signatures of the departed, shamanic portals to the spirit world, or something even more unexpected? Humanity's first attempt at a census, the most striking detail isn't the hands themselves, but what surrounds them. Scattered among the palm prints are vivid scenes of hunting, guanacos, wild ancestors of llamas sprinting in herds, pumas crouching in ambush, and human figures with spears poised to strike. These aren't static images, they pulse with movement, capturing split-second actions like a prehistoric flipbook. Some researchers, like archaeologist Carlos Achero, argue this isn't just art, it's a visual textbook. The hands could mark initiation rites, where young hunters left their imprint after a first successful kill, their palms pressed beside the very animals they'd learned to pursue. The missing fingers, not battle wounds as once thought, but deliberate folds, evidence of a complex sign language used to coordinate hunts in silence. Then there's the shamanic theory. Deep in the cave's recesses where natural light fades, the handprints cluster thickest. Here, the pigments were blown through hollow bones, a technique requiring breath control still used by modern shamans to induce trance states. Ethnographic records from Patagonian tribes describe caves as thresholds to the underworld, where pressing one's hand to the rock could seal a pact with spirits. The colors tell their own story: red from iron oxide for lifeblood, white from gypsum for purity, black from manganese for the unknown. Some hands even appear to push out from the stone as if the wall were a veil between worlds. But the boldest idea comes from demographer Luis Borrero. He noticed the hand sizes and distributions match the age structure of a small, stable population, roughly 60 individuals, with ratios of children to adults consistent with hunter-gatherer groups. Could this be a Stone Age roster, a way to track the living and honor the dead? The cave's layers support this. Hands were added over millennia, generations literally leaving their mark. What lingers isn't just the mystery of their purpose, but the humanity. These prints weren't made by some abstract, ancient people. They were individuals, their palms warm with pigment, their breath still echoing in the hollows of the bone pipes. Whether ritual, record, or both, the cave whispers one truth. 9,000 years later, we still reach out, hoping the future will feel our presence pressed against time. Beneath the bustling streets of modern Mexico City, archaeologists unearthed a structure so horrifying it forced the world to reconsider everything we thought we knew about Aztec rituals. The Huey Tzompantli, the Great Skull Rack of Templo Maya, wasn't just a macabre display. It was a sprawling, pulsating monument to the Aztec cosmos, where rows upon rows of human skulls stretched into the hundreds. Recent excavations revealed a grisly truth. This wasn't merely a trophy case for conquered enemies. It was an ever-growing, meticulously curated archive of souls, a bridge between the living and the gods. Spanish chroniclers like Bernal Diaz del Castillo wrote of seeing tens of thousands of skulls lining the rack, their hollow eyes staring blankly across the plaza. For centuries, historians dismissed these accounts as exaggerations, propaganda meant to justify conquest. Then, in 2017, workers renovating a colonial-era building struck bone. And more bone, and more. The discovery of over 650 skulls embedded in a single tower confirmed Diaz wasn't lying. If anything, he'd understated the scale. But these weren't the skulls of warriors. Forensic analysis revealed a shocking diversity. Men, women, even children, their bones showing signs of ritual flaying and careful preservation. Isotope testing traced some victims hundreds of miles from Tenochtitlan, proving the Aztecs sourced sacrifices from across their empire, the most unsettling detail. Many skulls bore precise drill holes along the sides, suggesting they'd once been strung on wooden poles like beads on a string, slowly weathering into the tower's mortar. This changes everything. Traditional narratives framed the Tzompantli as a tool of terror designed to intimidate rivals, but the archaeology paints a subtler picture. The skulls weren't haphazardly piled, they were arranged in concentric circles, with the oldest at the core and fresher additions radiating outward. Some showed signs of being painted or adorned with precious stones before display. To the Aztecs, these weren't just remains, they were ixipla, sacred vessels holding the life force of those sacrificed. Each skull represented a debt repaid to the gods, ensuring the sun would rise and crops would grow. Yet the Tzompantli's true function might be even more profound. Recent 3D mapping shows the skull tower aligned with the summer solstice sunrise, casting shadows that mirrored the Aztec creation myth, where the gods sacrificed themselves to set the sun in motion. The message was cosmic. Without death, there could be no rebirth. Today, the excavated skulls sit in climate-controlled labs, their silent faces challenging us to see beyond our horror. The Aztecs didn't collect heads, they curated eternity, one life at a time. And in the shadow of Templo Maya, the stones still whisper their unsettling truth, that in the Aztec world, the line between cruelty and devotion was as thin as a blade of obsidian. On the volcanic slopes of Tenerife, where trade winds whip across ancient pyramids, the Guanche mummies whisper a tantalizing connection to distant shores. These enigmatic remains, preserved through meticulous techniques perfected over centuries by the Canary Islands' indigenous people, share eerie parallels with practices thousands of miles away in Peru and Mexico. But how could a culture isolated on Atlantic islands mirror traditions of the pre-Columbian world? The answer might rewrite our understanding of ancient transoceanic contact, or reveal humanity's universal fascination with cheating death. First, consider the mummification itself. The Guanches removed organs through incisions, stuffed body cavities with aromatic herbs and minerals, then sun-dried the corpses, a process strikingly similar to the methods of Egypt and the Chinchorro culture of Chile. Chemical analysis of Guanche embalming resins even identifies plant compounds found in Andean mummy bundles, yet the Guanches had no known contact with these civilizations. Some researchers, like anthropologist Rafael González Antón, argue this points to a shared ancestral knowledge carried by early migrations out of Africa. Others propose a more radical idea, that faint but persistent currents could have swept vessels between the Canaries and the Caribbean, leaving traces of cultural exchange. Then there are the pyramids. At Guima on Tenerife's eastern coast, 6-stepped platforms of lava stone rise in perfect alignment with the summer solstice sunrise. Their construction, with agricultural terraces and ceremonial spaces, mirrors the truncated pyramids of Mesoamerica and the ceremonial platforms of Peru's Moche. Mainstream scholars attribute this to independent invention, the tendency of cultures worldwide to develop similar solutions to spiritual and engineering challenges. But Guanche oral traditions speak of bearded strangers arriving by sea long before Europeans, bringing advanced knowledge. Could these have been storm-blown Amerindian sailors or survivors of a forgotten Atlantic voyage? The most compelling evidence lies in the details. Guanche mummies were often wrapped in goatskin shrouds dyed red, identical in technique to the Paracas culture's textiles off Peru's coast. Both cultures also practiced cranial deformation, elongating infant skulls as a mark of nobility. Even their death rituals align. Guanches placed their mummies in caves with funerary gifts, much like the Chachapoya's cliffside tombs. Spanish chronicles from the 14th century describe Guanche nobles with golden skin and red hair, physical traits that baffled European invaders and fueled speculation about pre-Columbian gene flow. Yet the greatest mystery isn't the similarities, it's the silence. If contact occurred, why no shared crops, no linguistic traces? Perhaps the exchanges were brief, sporadic. Or perhaps we've underestimated the Guanche's ingenuity, their ability to innovate in isolation while reflecting a deeper, shared human impulse to honor the dead. Their mummies endure as quiet rebels against time, their stories etched not in scrolls but in skin and stone, waiting for the tides of history to wash their secrets ashore. From the Nazca Lines' celestial riddles to the sacrificial crypts beneath Teotihuacan, the ancient Americas remain a puzzle box we've only begun to crack. Think about it, we're standing in the shadow of civilizations that carved obsidian into mirrors reflecting the cosmos, engineered cities that sang with the wind and vanished without leaving so much as a whisper of their final days. Even with satellites and DNA testing, we're still piecing together fragments. Were the Paracas mummies evidence of lost voyages or just nature's quirks etched in bone? Did the Calusa's shell empires hold the key to sustainable living, or were they doomed from the start? Every answer we dig up seems to unearth 10 new questions. Take Cahokia's collapse. One theory blames drought, another points to ritual violence spiraling out of control. But what if the truth is something we haven't even considered? And how do we explain the Olmec heads, those stone giants whose African-like features taunt us with possibilities of pre-Columbian connections, the wildest part? This isn't ancient history. Right now, archaeologists are battling jungle vines and melting glaciers to uncover sites that could rewrite textbooks tomorrow. Here's what keeps me up at night. We've only scratched the surface. For every Machu Picchu we've mapped, there's a dozen more Kailaps or Weri cities waiting beneath the dirt. These aren't just stories about the past, they're invitations. Maybe you're the one who'll spot a clue everyone else missed or connect dots across continents. That's the thrill of history, it's never really finished. So tell me in the comments which mystery hooked you hardest, the Chavín Temple's sonic nightmares, the Hopewell star-charted earthworks, or something we didn't even cover today. Hit subscribe if you're as obsessed with these enigmas as I am, because trust me, this series is just getting started. The past isn't done surprising us yet.